Hey everyone, James here. While editing this episode, I noticed a couple of inconsistencies and things I wanted to place a disclaimer on. First thing is that we're not professional theologians, philosophers, video game designers, or playtesters. We're merely guys who are practicing their Catholic faith and learning along the way, just like a lot of you out there. Please keep that in mind during this discussion on horror games, especially when we begin to dive into the faith. There are points where we are potentially wrong, and if we are, we're sorry. We always advise people to do their research, read the Bible, read the Catechism, and discuss with their local parish priest if they have questions. And the other thing is during the discussion on the game Faith, Joe is utilizing the language of you as the priest cast out the demon. Joe wanted to place the disclaimer that priests do not cast out demons. Jesus is the one who is the casting out the demon, and the priest is there on Jesus' behalf, and Jesus works through them. So with that being said, please enjoy this episode. Yeah, ours was at Pebble Creek. And
yeah. Abby just sat all day. She didn't actually participate in any golf. She just kind of sat there and suntanned.
Hey, at least she's outside.
That was her job today. She sat and suntanned.
Very nice. My job for the entire thing was to, or at least as assigned on the email, was to do the, what was it? Indoor games or something like that. And I had a new employee orientation. So right when they're like, oh, now you can do your job 4 or 5 hours in, I had to be like, all right, peace. I got to go do my, actual job. So I basically sat around all morning, not doing anything. Yay.
But you're outside in the sun, so I'm sure you're baking.
No, I was indoors.
Oh.
Yeah, you're outside. Oh, you're indoors for the training.
No, I was indoors. It's the drive place.
Oh, the simulator.
Well, it's not a simulator. It's in a giant balloon.
Oh,
yeah.
Up on 19th Street. You know what I'm talking about?
It was like the old Presentation College bubble. You remember that, Joe?
I have barely been to Presentation College.
Okay, well, they had a big bubble dome that they would fill up, and then that would just called their quote unquote dome. It was nice, and we have one of those here in town. It stays inflated all year round, though.
Yep.
Huh. Never would have thought of that. Well, welcome to Those Catholic Gamers, a podcast about Catholic guys coming together to discuss video games and their Catholic faith. I am Joseph, your host for today, and I am joined by my two dear friends right here, James.
Oh, gee, thanks.
And Connor.
Yellow, and don't let Joe fool you. He is the king chump.
Connor is the chump. Folks, I'm the host. That means that I have the mostest. And Connor, you're the chumpostest. Anyways, today's topic, we're going to be talking about genres. And actually, there are a ton of genres in video games. Just look at the Steam tags. There are tons and tons and tons, and they cross over. Like some games you wouldn't think would have a certain game tag. It just does because of one slight element or one user review. Today, we're going to start this whole discussion off with horror. Very, very spooky stuff. I know it's not the spooky time yet, although if you are listening in, I guess it would be the present for you. If you're listening in October, happy Halloween. Boo.
Jokes on you. The skeletons are already inside of you. Ooh!
So we will be talking about horror today, going into how does horror relate to Catholicism in terms of is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Have my boys played horror games? Have they not? We'll be talking about all that kind of stuff today, and getting to the bottom of it. Let's start off with you, James. what games come to mind in your library that are horror based that you did expect?
State of Decay, pretty much anything with zombies in it. So Dead Island, Daisy, the Walking Dead series.
Ooh, good series.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Let's see here.
Like the Telltale?
Yeah.
Oh, good
The,
stuff.
the ones that actually have like moral implications and it's good stuff. I really enjoyed that. What was it? The BioShock series?
Yeah,
At least the first two.
those are great. Yeah, I really like both BioShocks, the first two, and Infinite actually. But that's not really
Infinite's
horror.
good. It doesn't. I don't think it holds up as much, but that's a conversation for a different time. Let's see here. Darkest Dungeon. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this one before.
I've played it. It is absolutely well, okay, it's super hard. I wish I could get into
from
it.
what I see.
Yeah, so that's getting more into your horror, psychological horror, and then almost like your Lovecraftian kind of horror, which is more up my alley because I don't like the graphic horrors or the or dare I say torture porn kind of stuff.
The blood and guts style.
Yeah,
horror. The
So,
Saw
like-
series style of horror.
Yeah, so I've never played anything like Amnesia, or what was it, Outlast, or your Dead Space kind of stuff, because that is like pretty graphic in your face, and that's just not my thing. But let's see here. I mean, what was it? Duskers is a great one. Is a great element where it's like it's a very simple game, and it is absolutely terrifying, and all you're doing is controlling drones.
Interesting.
So yeah, that's we can dive into that a little bit later if we want. But otherwise, what was it? The Forest. I mean, right, that sense of isolation and seeing things move on the horizon.
We have streamed that one. We played that together on stream, and I have probably one of my favorite clips of all time by James on that.
You're welcome.
It was
What was
so
that
freaking
one?
funny.
It's so good.
It's the one where he comes up and he's like, "Hey guys, look what I got!" And I look over and he's holding a shark head, and he's like, "Look what I got!" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, you got a shark head!" And so we decided to put together a bunch of resources and make a shark head totem.
Yep.
After that, and we made a whole bridge out to the boat.
Yep.
I forgot we played that game. Should we play Sons of the Forest 2? Or sorry, just Sons of the Forest?
I'd be game.
Yeah.
I already own it, so I'd be absolutely down to play that. But Connor, how about you? What games are on your list that they're horror and you expected that?
Yeah, there's two for sure. The Phasmophobia. We've played that. I am absolutely terrible at it. Probably because I don't know the mechanics of it. I play with you guys, and you guys are like super knowledgeable, and I just kind of go along for the ride. We did finally the other day when Joe was up to visit for my son's birthday. We played it in VR, and I will never play Phasmo in VR ever again. We walked in, and all of a sudden my flashlight flickered, and the whole screen went black, and it was like just pure darkness. And I went, "Okay, I'm done." Whereas Joe and Claire literally didn't even get inside the house. They were like, "Okay,
please.
It's too dark. I can't go in there. I can't play this." And I was like, "Okay, I'm actually gonna play the game."
Yeah.
So poor Connor. For anybody who's played it, he had a ghost event happen as soon as he walked in the house, and yet he decided to still go to the basement where the haunting was occurring. And just the entire time, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. As he walks down the stairs, and it's like, Connor, you don't have to do it. Just quit.
I was scared, okay?
You went the wrong way.
I don't care. I wanted to play the game. So, yeah,
we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But
I had that game, and then I have my second game, which is called Fear, which is an amazing first-person shooter. I'm more of a psychological thriller kind of horror game. And the Fear game, the first one especially, just plays with your brain. And the AI in that game is so smart. It just knows what you're thinking before you go. And the whole thing with the little child that's basically corrupting your brain as you're searching through this giant warehouse it's a great game. It's probably hands down one of my favorite games of all time. It's just so much fun to play, and you're just going around just like shooting dudes, doing slow time, and yeah, it's a great horror game, great first person shooter. And then they just completely messed up the last two, just totally got completely away from its roots. Granted, the second one was
story.
Yeah, very, very dark.
Very dark.
So I have those two, and then I guess other games on my in my lobby that are quasi horror. I mean, Resident Evil 4. It's not really scary. Probably one of the best games of all time. Resident Evil 4 is amazing. We played Lethal Company the other day. We still have to finish more of that. But that was a great game. That was a lot of fun. James, do you have that?
No.
Okay.
I think your computer can handle that one. That'd be fun.
Yeah, Lethal Company would be a great Steam game to get, or a stream game to play.
Yeah, that one's a little bit, I think, too much for me because it has those jump scare kind of deals.
Yeah. I suppose,
I'm really not one for the jump scares.
Actually, that's a good transition. Different types of, so like within the horror genre, you've got a bunch of different types of horror out there. Whoa, sorry.
Hold on, Joe. What about you?
Okay, Connor, go ahead.
Couple more things. And we have 7 Days to Die, another great game. That's kind of a horror game, but it's also like a sandbox game.
Yeah, that's one I do need to get, and we should play that.
That is heckin' good.
Yeah, and then Getting Over It with Benny Foddy, definitely considered a horror game. Definitely traumatizing. Probably
psychological horror.
Definitely one of the scariest games you'll ever play. And it's the Satan's anus is what we call it. Satan's tower is literally the worst. And the anvil. Just terrible. Just awful. Anyway, that was what I was going to say. Joe?
I'll just quickly go through my list of games. Then I want to talk about the different types of horror. But games that I own that are considered horror. 7 Days to Die, Alien Isolation, Amnesia, The Dark Descent, Axiom Verge, BioShock, BioShock Remastered, BioShock 2, BioShock 2 Remastered, Black Mirror 1, Blasphemous, Darkest Dungeon, Deadbolt, Depth, Devour, Doki Doki Literature Club. We'll talk more about that later. Don't Starve Together, Dread Out, Faith, Five Nights at Freddy's, The Forest, Getting Over It, Bennett Foddy, Half-Life 2, The Hat Man. I don't know what that one is. Never played that. Left 4 Dead 2, Lethal Company, Limbo, Little Nightmares, The Long Dark, Mortal Shell, Neverending Nightmare, No One Lives Under the Lighthouse, Oxenfree, Phasmophobia. Oxenfree was a really good one.
That's a chilling story.
It's chilling, and it's like, well, okay, we'll talk about that later, guys. It's a good genre, but
okay. How many games are we going to talk about? We need to like narrow these things down. We can't just say we're going to talk about 20 games later.
No, it'll probably be like in different episodes later on. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
I was going to say, I'm just buzzing through my list quick because you guys mentioned a couple games, so I want to get through mine quick so we can talk about something else, but we can just jump ahead. So, let's see here. The genre of horror has a bunch of different types of subgenres, you could call them, like the jump scare, like James mentioned, which, personal opinion, it's cheap. Let's talk about that one first. Connor, how do you feel about jump scares? Is it a legit tactic?
Absolutely not. I think most jump scare games are basically like 90% of the horror genre, especially modern horror genre, where it's just cheap. It just all it does is just try to get you distracted and then throw something in your face. It doesn't ever like Phasmo does have jump scares, but like it sets you up for the jump scares, and it's like a continual, like, especially when the hauntings happen. Mm-hmm. It's really good. So it does a little bit of both, but I don't like jump scare games. I think they're cheesy and cheeky. I just don't think they bear very much merit.
I agree with that. I definitely think it's atmosphere versus the cheap jump scareness. Now, James, can you think of any game that kind of would be emblematic of that jump scare tactic that does it the worst?
Oh, probably Five Nights at Freddy's.
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, because I mean, essentially, right, the game forces you to not move, and it physically builds up tension, and either for some reason you're able to get through, what was it, the 7 days or something like that, But even then, there are many jump scares throughout that game. It's a cheap thrill. Some people really, really like it. I don't understand why. I don't know. Like this will probably tie into a little bit later in our discussion of, is horror a good thing? Should we have horror? And I mean, to an extent, right? Like we have events in our lives that are going to be scary and they're going to be immediate. And I mean, the whole purpose of horror is to train ourselves so that we're able to process what's going on and then fight back instead of like cowering away or running.
Right, because there's two options, right? Fight or flight.
Yeah, pretty much. But at the same time, if you're always just looking for that thrill, you're not training, you're beginning to look for a dopamine rush, which can be problematic, I think.
Right. Which can be addictive in and of itself.
Yeah. So, and I mean, there's a lot of games that have kind of followed in the footsteps of the Five Nights at Freddy's series with more grotesque imagery.
It's always aimed at kids too, which is just
which is gross.
Yeah.
Right.
It's all started on iPods and all that, and touchscreens, and just like trying to get kids scared. And it was huge for a while there. It kind of died off. But yeah,
it's coming back a bit.
Yeah, now the movie's coming out.
Yeah.
yeah. But no, what was it? One game that isn't on our list because it never was released on Steam. Do any of you remember playing the original Slenderman game that was only released on the computer, like online?
Yes, it was not scary.
Really?
It can get scary.
Oh.
I knew exactly so like when some of my friends got together, and they're like, "Oh, we're gonna play Slenderman. Oh, you're gonna get so scared. We're gonna turn off all the lights and play Slenderman." I was like, "Okay." And I have to be in the like mood to get scared because I know enough about video game mechanics to be dangerous. And so like I knew exactly when the jump scares would happen. So I was literally like walking into something and my screen would flicker and be like, okay, well now I've got X amount of pages. He's probably going to be right behind me right now. And I literally turned around and he was right there. And I was like, okay, I called it. That wasn't scary. And like, you're supposed to run away from him. And it's like, okay, I'll run away from him. But like, it was very predictable for me as a scary game. Like there was not like a sense of just wildness. It wasn't like there's no story. No, like there's nothing setting you up to be scared. You just have to go grab pages, and the more pages you have, the more dangerous he becomes.
Yeah.
I'd agree with that. I also sorry, go ahead.
And and I didn't think it was scary. I'm probably the only one in the world that probably didn't think that, but it was too predictable for me.
And I definitely agree with that. I think there's a lot of these games where, like Five Nights at Freddy's, once you can kind of boil it down to, oh yeah, it's just a video game. It's all ones and zeros. There's a way of doing it that I can usually win. Well, then it kind of breaks the game. It's not scary anymore. Slender's like that. Five Nights at Freddy's is kind of like that. A little bit Phasmophobia too. That's why I think, I was getting better, and Claire is pretty good at that game because she watched a lot of Let's Players do it. So she knows all the small nuances of the game. So it's just a game to her. There is no fear left in it. So I think if you want a really good horror game, if you take a lot of that, knowledge out of it, it's, the fear of the unknown. So
yeah. But at the same time, is it a good horror game if it eventually becomes not scary?
Right. If it becomes calculated.
Well, I think that's just a game at that point. That's why I think, Connor, the AI game that you were talking about, I think that's one that would be absolutely terrifying, is one where it's unpredictable. It will always be unpredictable.
Fear?
Yeah.
Yeah. You can play it through. I mean, you can master it like any other game. Like you could speedrun it. Like that's the thing. But like for me, fear hit in a different realm that was outside of the jump scare realm that we're talking about. But if you want to get into the other realms, we can do that.
The other genres, let's see, other subgenres. Try saying that 10 times fast.
Subgenre.
What would you say? Atmosphere would be another one of them. Another type, or psychological.
I would kind of lump them together, to be honest with you.
So psychological is in like something that gets in your head, something where it's not just on the face as jump scare. It's more it's that little worm that eats into your brain.
Right.
It's the atmosphere of the game, the small sounds you hear, the unknown behind the darkness, the bump in the night. Boo.
Yep.
Yeah.
I
I
mean
think
that. Go ahead.
that's my favorite style of horror game. Is the psychological thriller. Like I really like Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, and that's kind of like
Mm-hmm.
it was one of the first movies I actually legitimately got terrified in. And Silence of the Lambs, also another like
Oh,
scare
so
your
good.
pants off
Oh, that's a
game
great
or movie.
movie.
Both movies are just like I love this, and like that's the kind of game that I love to be a part of. Like that scares the crap out of me. Something that can really set you into that mood, and it basically you lose kind of almost your grip of reality sometimes when you get into that, and it makes you like double think what's going on in the world. And it's something that builds and builds and builds in your brain, and you can't get rid of it almost until
Mhm.
you eventually you go to bed or you wake up the next day and you're doing better. But those are the kind of games I love.
I would 100% agree with that. Now, Connor, you brought up a little bit, where it kind of gets in your head and affects your life. James, let's bring it back to faith. Psychological horrors. Good, bad. Can it be good? Can it also be bad? What are we thinking?
I think so. With psychological horror, I mean, the games that really stick out to me are the ones that have really strong narrative, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're trying to relay a story, or they're trying to grapple with some sort of philosophical idea. So, for example, Soma. Have you guys played or watched a playthrough of that game?
I feel like I've heard of Soma. Let me look that up real quick.
I've never heard of it. I apologize. I think I'm more BioShock.
Sure. BioShock. Yeah, I have opinions about BioShock and its story. Like it's good for its time, but when I look at it from a philosophical view, it doesn't seem to hold up as well. Um, but or at least going with like Soma, right? So the basic story is that you're a guy with some sort of brain traumatic injury, and your brain gets scanned, and then the next thing you, as the player, are aware of is your person who's had their brain scanned has woken up like 200-300 years in the future,
Oh.
and they're working with they're grappling with this idea of what does it mean to be a person, and who are we, right? So if we are to scan our brain and we load it into a computer, is that us, or is that copy a different thing? Is that copy a real thing? And they're trying to grapple with this idea, and essentially the philosophical direction that they go with is the copies do seem to exist as a separate entity, but it doesn't move you. So the person that you first played as died, 6 months later because of his traumatic brain injury, tragically. So this copy of the scan, this personality, you're actually in a robot. You're essentially a robot, and you've been moving around, and then you've been scanning your consciousness, and then it looks like you're getting up and moving into the next section. Well, what has actually happened is the previous thing that you've been playing as is now stuck for
Oh,
all
interesting.
eternity on the bottom of the ocean floor. And you get to see both sides at the very end. And it is horrifying
Oh.
Okay.
at the very end. And so when you have games like that are willing to kind of ask these big questions, and they're not really pushing an ideology, they're just kind of trying to work out something. I think that is when horror games are really, really good. Psychological horror games are really, really good. My problem is those games that like to stick that needle in and stay in there, and they're just there to keep you nervous or frightened, but there is no additional thing.
Yeah, there's no recollection of it. There's no there's no trying to come to a conclusion.
Precisely.
It's just giving you an idea. It's giving this, okay, you're isolated, and it's not providing any kind of resolution.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or it was like, well, that was kind of a fun story. Moving on. Right. Or
It's just trying to be a thought experiment.
and honestly, this is kind of why I don't watch a lot of horror films. Is because they're more of about the shock and awe. And I internalize a lot of things.
What? Who knew?
What?
Who
Not
knew?
you, Connor.
No.
So because of that, I don't watch horror because I would sit and internalize it and go over it and over it and over it, and my heart rate would be at like 200 beats per minute, and it would not be a healthy thing for me to do. So, but yeah, and then there's certain games out there, right, who have those horror elements where things are spooky, ethereal, and they're trying to tell a story, but they're not classically horror. I've played one where it's the grandfather of the walking simulator. It's called Dear Esther. Have you guys heard of this?
Sounds
No.
slightly familiar.
Okay. It's exactly what I just said, right? It's a walking simulator. You literally are like on this island. You don't really know if it's a dream or if things are really happening. And you're just kind of walking in this beautiful landscape. And as you progress, a voiceover is kind of telling a story. And it's just that for, I don't know, 45 minutes or something like that.
Oof.
And
Oh, wait. What's the game called? It just came out. It's just kind of a weird, funky game. I was watching one of my favorite streamers play it, and it basically narrates you, and your character, you can either follow what the narrator says or completely ignore him.
Is it the one with the bucket?
Are you talking about the
Oh.
Stanley Parable?
Yeah,
Stanley Parable. Is it like that?
Yes and no. So it's not like the narrator is talking to you and breaking the fourth wall. It's more of like you get to a certain point on the island, and then your character, as if like reading from a diary or a book, is relating more story.
Okay.
There are points where you're like going into a cave. It's very dark, and then there's like a flashback. And I'm not going to spoil it because I think the story is kind of interesting and fascinating, and but there are definitely elements where you are frightened because you don't know what's going to happen, because you just kind of picked up this game. You have nothing to defend yourself with, and you're kind of going through these odd environments, and it can be kind of spooky and downright terrifying at times. But there is no actual horror, right? There's no jump scares. There's no thing against you. It's just you sitting in the loneliness of the story.
Gotcha. So that's kind of like what you're saying with the thought experiment.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, would you guys say a game is more or less scary if you can actually fight the evil? Like, with Resident Evil, you have a gun, you can fight the monsters. Technically, a good Resident Evil game, they're going to make it so you don't have the best weapons, you're not going to be able to insta-kill whatever creature is thrown at you, but at the same time, does it make it any less scary if you can kill the monster? Connor, what do you think?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, I'm an objective style gamer. I like being given an objective to do. Whereas when you get into your Resident Evil 7s and things like that, where you're basically just along for the ride and you're just trying to survive. That kind of game doesn't, I wouldn't say is as fun for me, but that's just more of a personal antidote than it is saying it's a better game. Yeah, I'm trying to think. What was the question again?
If you have some sort of weapon to fight the big bad or the scary monster, does it make the game more or less scary? Can it still be scary if you have a weapon to beat the? Let's take Alien Isolation for instance. In that game, you aren't given a gun until like later on, and so if the alien finds you, you will die. And I think later on you are given a gun, but you can't kill the alien unless you unload like 2 whole clips into it. And so it still has that element of, just don't mess with the alien.
Yeah, I definitely think it would still be scary. In and of itself, having weapons to shoot. It, but also I can see why not having. If we're going purely on scariness, yeah, not having a weapon and getting chased around the freaking building would be terrifying. And I would say that would probably be more scary if you have something to shoot back with it. And that's what the original Resident Evils were kind of more geared around, where you weren't given a ton of ammo. You were given guns and to do stuff, but you were very, very limited in your ammo. And it was how much you could shoot into the zombie or however. That's what really made it scary. I guess I haven't played too many games that you're not given weapons to shoot back. I guess I shouldn't say that. Lethal Company.
Yeah.
I do like Lethal Company, and it's definitely the same where you're not allowed to shoot back. Or Phasmo, like Phasmo, you're not allowed to attack back, and that game is freaking terrifying.
And at least in Phasmo, you do have a smudge stick, so you can stop the monster, but you have to be really good at doing it at the right time, and sometimes you get caught without it. So it's just,
it takes skill.
Yeah. James, how about you?
I think that this question has been pretty well documented and answered through the game Amnesia, or the Amnesia series.
I have it, but I've never played it. Tell me about it.
So essentially, it's psychological horror and then kind of an action horror puzzle style game. You wake up, you don't know who you are. You're in this castle, and
you're given a camcorder, aren't you?
That's Outlast.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Never mind.
So, gosh, what was it?
Or are you thinking Dread Out with the camera?
Or Fatal Frame?
That's that one too. So many camera games.
It's almost like it's a good idea.
Right. So Amnesia is you're trying to solve puzzles. You're trying to figure out who you are, what has happened to you, and then on top of that, you're being hunted by this thing. And if you look at it, it becomes more aware of you. So you are forced by the game to not look at the thing that is chasing you. So there's that psychological horror, that cosmic horror. Because by looking at it, you will grow mad and then you'll, die or whatever. You'll lose. So because of that, you are constantly like trying to find a place to hide. That having that element, I think, is going to be scarier than the ability, at least the foreknowledge of I can fight back. So Outlast, what made Outlast so good was it combined Amnesia and Fatal Frame. So you are constantly being hunted. You're going up against these horrific enemies, but it's also essentially forcing you to also kind of look them in the face because you're an investigative journalist and you're trying to get the story and the news and all that. So it's an interesting combination there. And then what was it with at least Alien Isolation? They give you the false sense of hope with the gun, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Because most of your weapons are able to take care of most of your enemies within the game, right? So you're
cyborgs.
Yeah, I was looking for the other term that the Alien series use them, or
what are they?
It starts with an A or something like that.
Android?
Androids. Thank you. So yeah, the androids that are attacking you, the people who are attacking you, the face huggers that are attacking you, all of those can be fought back, or you can fight back against. You cannot fight against the xenomorph, but those are
Right.
very scripted elements where the xenomorph, uh, you know, you get to a certain area and then it shows up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're trying to balance that portion. So, like, the allure of the game was the xenomorph is always hunting you. It's not exactly the case.
Right.
So I would argue that if you have an enemy that you know you can't stop, and the only thing you can do is to hide, or you have no weapon to defend yourself against with, that definitely makes the game more frightening.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, I'm also just absolutely awful at stealth games, so I don't play those kinds of.
Oh, I love stealth games.
Yeah, so I meant essentially it's stealth but horror, right?
Right.
Mhm.
It's kind of a forced stealth, unlike Assassin's Creed, where you're constantly trying. Well, not the way I play, but you're supposed to be hiding all the time. But it just kind of seems like it slows down the game. Where for horror, it's almost like it makes you as the player also feel kind of safe to have somewhere to hunker down for a second.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I'm the kind of guy, if there's stealth involved, I would prefer it. Like, I love the Hitman games and just stealthing around and not getting caught. I like the Assassin's Creed games where you just have to sneak around and stab someone stealthily. Like, I'm not a go loud kind of guy. Not a go in and guns blasting kind of guy. Like, that's why I like doing in Payday 2 and 3. Like, I like to be able to stealth, and it's frustrating in and of itself, but it's a lot of fun for me. So I might have to look into this game. I think that would be something that would be
Amnesia
tickles my
or
not
Alien?
Amnesia.
Alien
What's the other?
Isolation.
Alien Isolation.
I only have 3.3 hours on record. I can't remember what part I got to. I wasn't very far in the game, but I got
Probably
kind of
right when the
frustrated.
xenomorph showed up.
Probably I hate I hate stealth sections, so I
Yeah.
probably quit because of that.
I mean, also the xenomorph is probably one of the most terrifying figures
Oh,
in
100%.
visual media. It
Oh
is
yeah,
a just terrifying looking creature.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
well, and in the game, you have to physically, be up against it. It's not just like, oh, it's on the big screen. It's like, no, I'm there.
Mm-hmm. Well, Joe, what about you?
What was the question? What did I ask originally?
What's more scarier? Being able to go up against something that you can shoot or attack back with, or something that you have nothing to attack back?
I personally believe it's almost good to have a balance because I think a game that's just scary all the time, I can play that every once in a while. Like every October, I get an itch to play some scary games. But that's not my thing. I'm not really drawn to that all the time. Maybe psychological horror, but not horror in of itself. That's why I think Resident Evil does a fantastic job with balancing horror where it's like you can't really beat the monster, but at the same time, you get those guns and you get better, you get more skilled, so now you can deal with those monsters. And so those monsters become less scary, but they throw new challenges at you where it becomes scary again. So it's almost like a cycle of scariness as you play the game, or maybe if you want to think of it like a spring where it's spiraling upwards to the peak of scariness. Like Connor, you have to remind me of what they're called, but the ones where you have to use a thermal scope on your gun to beat them.
A thermal scope?
No. What's not the name of the gun, the name of the monster?
In what game?
Resident Evil 4 or the Lost Plagos.
Yeah, those, I forget the name of them, but yeah, they're big lumbering things that you can either shoot the heart or you could shoot off all the limbs a bunch of times and basically damage it out, which is not a good way of beating them. I don't know what those are called, but they're Los Plagos, they're like their final form kind of thing.
Yeah, if I remember right with that one, the Lost Plagos is basically a parasite that infects human and then transforms into these hideous creatures. For this one, I think it was like sarcophagus. I can't remember what the monster was called, but basically has these giant spikes that shoot out and hurt the player. And so it's just lumbering after you slightly slowly, and so you have to figure out how to go and defeat it.
Menacingly.
Very menacingly. So eventually you find out through notes, or actually beforehand you find out through notes, that if you get a thermal scope, you can actually see, because it's basically a walking corpse and these parasites are the only living things on it. So by looking through the scope, you can see exactly where those parasites are and then shoot those off. Without knowing that, though, you are kind of a sitting duck. And so
Yeah, you just unload all your ammo into it, and then all of a sudden you're out of ammo, and then you die. Because
and I think that does a really good job of that cyclical horror that I was talking about, where it is absolutely terrifying, and then it becomes less terrifying because you know all about it. And then they throw you in a situation where now there's 5 of them in a room, and it's like, well, I know how to defeat them, but at the same time, they're still scary as heck. So I think that is where you can have that balance between it's just a shooter, I can easily beat the monster, and it's just kind of that cheap jump scares, why it's still horror, versus the I have nothing and it's just, plain and simple horror.
you got to be smart.
Yeah.
Well, it becomes like the movies, right? Like a good horror movie, like your Jason Voorhees and your Chucky, right? Like they become characters in of itself, and a big part is the ending, running away and trying to survive.
Right. Kind of they have to use their skills they learn throughout the entire movie to beat the big bad, or subsequently to not beat the big bad, which I absolutely love. And I think we've talked about this at the party, Connor. Aliens, why it is so absolutely fantastic is they set up that climactic ending at the very beginning of the show, and they show like, oh, she's using a forklift, no big deal, right? And then it comes back after the entire movie. That is the finale. So good. Such good writing.
Yeah. She uses her skills.
But I guess we're here to talk about video games. Let's see here. Speaking of like psychological horror and stuff, I know at the very beginning, James, we talked about the Darkest Dungeon. Tell me a little bit more about that one, like the Eldritch horror. How does that build a theme for Darkest Dungeon?
Like what cosmic horror is?
Yeah, tell me a little bit more about it.
Okay, sure. So cosmic horror has to deal with the fear of the unknown or the unknowable. So this is your existential dread, that fear that gets on the inside and eats you from the inside out. And so at least in Darkest Dungeon, what was it? Your ancestor is what it's called. Basically is living a life of luxury, and because he has essentially gotten to know all of life's regular pleasures, they've decided, or he and his entourage have decided to discover deeper and more unknowable things, which eventually drives him mad to the point of, I believe, unfortunately, killing himself. Really, he's driven to a sense of madness. And then so you, as the heir to the estate, are trying to right the wrongs and figure out what happened. And what happened is they discovered things that should have been left unknown. That there was something called the heart of the world within the game, which is this eldritch being that essentially consumed your ancestor. Yeah, and basically you have to build up your group and train them up, and so you're battling their stress to the things that they're being exposed to, and also their health while on these adventures. But yeah, so cosmic horror is that kind of how do I battle, or how do I process that fear that cannot seemingly cannot be extinguished? how can I stamp it out, right? And and this is seen in other things as well, like this the Sunken London series. I don't know if you guys have heard of this.
No.
Mm-mm. No, I haven't.
So Sunken London is actually it's a website game, kind of like what was it? The West of Loathing. Have you guys heard of this one?
I feel like I've heard of the West of Loathing.
Yeah, that was like something that was big in or no, not the West of Loathing, but it was like a medieval loathing or something like that.
Okay.
It was a meat-based currency.
Oh.
I don't know. It was goofy. So it's completely online, and it's dealing with this eldritch cosmic horror element. And so there are certain video games that have spun off of that, like The Sunless Sea, where you have to deal with the stress of horror on your crew so that you can survive. So it's kind of dealing with that sanity meter, right? And how do we keep people sane when we're trying to discover what seems to be unknowable?
Yeah, I think of a time where we were playing with Father Andrew Thuringer. We were doing a game called Dread, and
so good.
He had basically we were a crew in the IHS, and basically the whole point of the game is you there's not really a script, but there's something that your characters have individual different abilities and like advantages, disadvantages, and like just background stuff, and you're narrating it. You're fighting over the DM, the quote unquote DM, over narrative control. And we came up to the IHS, and basically there were explosions happening, and eventually at the end of it, everybody dies. That's part of the game. Is you're trying to fight off death, but death is inevitable. And so it's kind of has that cosmic feel to it. And that's why I come up with this game, because I don't know of too many actual video games that do that, but it's instantly makes me think of Dread. And that's such a great game to play with people, because it allows you to fight over that narrative control and it shows people's creativity. And it really makes it flourish.
Mm-hmm.
It was a ton of fun.
Yeah, next time I'm up there, or maybe even Connor, if you want to lead something. Actually, we could do it over Discord, doing a Dread adventure with James. That'd be fun.
It would be. I feel like 99% of it is being around people. Like,
Yeah,
it is.
You could do it on Discord, but your atmosphere just is not there.
True, it becomes more of a joke or jokiness.
Yeah, and in Dread you can't joke, even
true.
though I played games where my character was Chad McBride, and I was like,
rest in peace, Chad McBride.
Chad McBride, baby. He was one of my favorite characters of all time. He was he was partly Abby's idea too. He was a frat bro. And then Andrew, who we're trying to get on the podcast, he was my brother, and his name was Thad McBride. So we were Chad and Thad McBride.
That's almost as bad as my my orc barbarian.
Yeah, Shakespeare.
I guess last question then here for you guys. Be thinking of an answer while I'm saying it. In video game horror, and I know like there's tons of different styles and stuff. Christianity, it encompasses us. God is everywhere. Video game horror, there's lots of elements we like to try to bring some form of either faux Christianity or honestly a lot of times just goes into blasphemy. Have you guys ever seen a game where they do Christianity right in a horror game setting? Like, we're talking demons, that sort of thing.
Well, here's the problem with a lot of video game Christianity, Catholicism, is people have the idea of it because they've seen it in horror movies. And horror movies are also very off on what actually happens, like The Exorcist and things like that. Like, so in Phasmo, you can get a cross that wards off certain types of not infected, but in certain type of ghouls and ghosts and stuff. So you can use it, but it's almost 99% of the time it's because someone's not actually Catholic or Christian. They just know of the realm of it, which I also think is great because no other type of religion can cast off those types of things. So it's kind of gives validity to Christianity in a roundabout way and Catholicism because yeah, you need someone to bless away. Like if demons do exist, that mean God exists.
Right.
God the Father. And so if you can't have one without the other in the Western sense. You can get some Eastern style of kanjis and random stuff, but it's very different. But yeah, I have a hard time seeing authentic reliquaries and like different prayers. You don't really see them at all in a lot of video games. At least I haven't seen any. And if you, dear viewer, have found one, put a comment or shoot us an email. And we'll make a redaction later. But
We'll edit and post.
editor, editor, please,
Edit in the comment right here,
right now. But yeah, I don't. But that's just me being nitpicky. When I do see things that talk about Christianity, I'm very firm because I know what liturgy is all about. I know a lot of what makes things authentic, and I think a lot of game developers also don't want to do that because they're afraid that they might get backlash too. So there's also that realm too, where I know of some people that they purposely do not want to be accurate because they don't want to be sacrilegious.
Or the problem is that they want to be sacrilegious.
Yeah, that's true too.
That's the other problem that that I've seen, Joe, against your question here, is we live in such a materialistic world where nothing exists beyond the physical, and
there is no actual metaphysical realm.
Yeah, right. They're essentially atomists,
Right.
philosophically.
Right. So then that is how video games turn to make things up,
Sometimes, or I mean, or you're dealing with a medium, right, where they're trying to bring about an understanding of a metaphysical reality, but they have to do it within physical realm, because I mean that's the medium that you're playing the game in. The only game that I've actually seen that does like an internal dialogue really well, that kind of doesn't require you to interact with the outside world, or it shows that you interact with the outside world, is the opening to Disco Elysium, which is a very interesting game. But I think the problem is that people who make video games don't understand Christianity, right? They have a pop culture understanding of what Christianity is, of what religion is, and that's about it. And I mean, this is a problem that is within most medium creating in most of the medium creating world, right? I've heard stories of even back when it was the 1980s or something like that, where the director or producers of a movie or of a TV show are like, all right, so somebody prays in this scene. Does anyone know how to pray? And this one actor was like, yeah, I used to pray when I was a 10-year-old. I kind of know what it looks like. And then they go and do it. And then, all right, that's praying. All right, moving on to the next scene. And it's literally that bad.
Because people don't want to take it seriously. Like
or they don't care.
Yeah, they don't care. That's a good point too. And I think a lot of it comes into, okay, do you then have to bring a specialist to come in and explain? Okay, do we want to spend a bunch of money and have an expert come in prayer? of like Christian prayer coming
Mhm.
and like that
Mhm.
costs money. Like if you don't have someone to come in and teach you how to do it, then that costs money. And it's, a lot of times they feel like they want to prioritize other things over that.
Which is
Yeah,
funny.
but
You could easily
but
get
then
a
you're
priest for pretty cheap. Priest would be happy to do it.
Yeah, but I don't think a lot of these people know where to find a priest.
yeah.
All I do is to
Exactly.
find a priest.
Where do you find one when they're in need? So I mean, there's that problem within the video gaming world. The other problem is that Christianity and religion in general definitely has or is seen through a Marxist lens, where it is seen as the opiate of the masses. It is a way of control. It is not. It is not a. Well, and I mean this ties into the problem of video games seeing and this is a conversation for another time, but the you are the most important person,
Right.
right? Either like humanity is central or your character in particular is central because everything revolves around you, and it's hard to make a game without that because otherwise it's
Right.
not very engaging. Or yeah, so you have that problem as well.
Right, and I think Catholicism and Christianity are this might sound kind of blasphemous, but it's a lot of self-sacrifice in and of itself. So you're sacrificing your own needs in order to gain a greater glory, right? You're sacrificing your own thoughts, feelings, and desires so that you can go to heaven and become one with Christ. Sometimes, sometimes.
No, no, that's
No?
not what the church teaches.
Okay, we're
No,
kind of like we'll cut that out.
no, like this is a good conversation. We should have this. The church teaches that we are saved by Christ.
Yes.
Christ tells us that to get to heaven, we need to be more like him. So, to be a Christian is to be a follower of Christ. So, we need to learn what he taught, do as he asks, which is follow me, which is to follow his commandments, which is to be in the church that he set up, and that is to follow under the supervision of the shepherds that he has provided us, our priests and bishops and the Pope.
Right. And that also means that we have to die to self, right? We have to
That
die.
does. But that does not mean that we merit heaven by our works. And that seemed to be what you were saying.
No, that's not what I was trying to get at. I
Okay.
apologize. No, I'm not saying that our works get us into heaven. No, that's not the case. It's it's no, because that is not right. No. I'm just trying to say that we have to die to individual desires to be able to grow in holiness.
Sure. Yeah. Practice virtue.
Practice virtue
So that we become the more of who we are supposed to be as created by God. Yes. And then through that we are able to then eventually go to heaven and be with God, our creator and our final end as the philosophers would put it. Yeah, no, that would make more sense.
So that's kind of what I was getting around.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to be more clear.
That's good. It's good. Here's my problem is I don't do a very good job explaining what goes on in my brain sometimes. It just kind of becomes word vomit, and I apologize, dear listener, if it becomes like that. And sometimes I just kind of shoot from the hip. So
yeah, well, I mean that's why this is not a one-man show. That is why I'm not doing this alone. You're not doing this alone. Like conversations like this should probably be done in a group, and it's more fun that way, I think.
Oh, 100%.
Gotta love the banter.
Oh, very much. So, but yeah, no, that's kind of my take on Christianity within games. It's pretty poor because there is a pretty it's a satirical, if not outright blasphemous understanding of what it actually is. And yeah, so I. But then again, I don't play a video game because, oh, it's the most Christian thing, right? I play games because these have good stories in them, and they are able to bring me and allow for me to grow in thought and practice different things or practice different options in reality. I mean, this is why we read, the Iliad and the Odyssey, right? If we were banned from reading pagan books, well, guess what? Those two are pagan books, but those are still read and taught because they have good quality and good character and good things to be taught in them.
They do have merit to them.
Mm-hmm. And you can get that in horror games. I think you have to be careful.
Yeah.
But
you got to think outside of the box of it a lot of times.
Mm-hmm. I think you also do have to be just careful, right? You video games are a medium where you are interacting with something else, and through that interaction, you are practicing a thought. So why am I playing a game? Am I doing it because there is an endorphin rush and that's it? I mean, every now and then it's probably fine.
You can say that about any game, right? You could say that about tactical first-person shooters or competitive games. Like, are you doing it just to get a rush of that just last man standing type feel that you just can't replicate, or the point of speed running, right? Where you're just trying to nail down those couple little inches, and then all of a sudden you set a record time and you just have a euphoric effect that you're just trying to constantly chase after.
Yep. So, I mean, that's where that self-searching and knowing your limits is very, very important in all things, but especially in video games, and I would say especially in playing horror.
Personally, I guess I've got two games I think actually do capture the faith pretty well. Like we discussed, nothing's gonna be perfect. I don't think they invite a priest on or any liturgical minister of any sort for a lot of these games to kind of just go based on their popular media or whatever they've done. But two games that actually I know have done their research. Two of them, maybe you've heard of them. One's called Faith, the other one's called Blasphemous.
I've heard of Blasphemous.
I've heard of Blasphemous. You recommended that to me.
Yeah, so I'll talk about that one first. So Blasphemous is a really good job of I believe it's somewhere in South America. But they have a celebration of the Virgin Mary and just the beauty in pain in general. And this game does a really good job of not just celebrating, but kind of the gist of the game is somebody was going through that self-sacrifice I don't know, journey or whatever, and it kind of manifested, and so now the entire world is in this perpetual state of self-sacrifice for the Lord. And I only have 3.2 hours in the game, so I can't really talk too well about it. But listener, if it's something that you think you'd like to play, it is absolutely beautiful. The artwork in the game mimics a lot of that same style they use in all the artwork in that culture. And it is a Catholic tradition that in Mexico, or not Mexico, sorry, in South America has kind of morphed into its own, but is still recognized by the church. Now, the other game, so sorry if I sped through that. The other game is Faith. This one is super interesting. I want both of you to go and look it up on Steam real quick. It actually has a DOS game type look to it. WASD, and I think the left mouse button is to hold up your cross, and that's it. You play as a priest who you were an assistant priest helping a senior priest do an exorcism. While you were out of the room to go get some water or get something, the exorcism gets botched, and so now you are trying to years and years later, you're trying to fix things and set things right, and leads this whole journey of fighting the devil. And so I think that's a really good game that goes over Christianity, because there's a lot of prayers in the game that you pray, or you have a rosary and a cross, and it does a really good job of, only through the Lord can you banish these demons. You can't do it, without that. So a very uneloquent and fast way of saying I recommend Faith and Blasphemous if you're looking for horror games that also get that Catholic feel right.
Just looking through it, I don't think
I don't
Faith
know
would
about
be a
that.
very good game to recommend.
No.
Have you played it?
No, but I'm seeing a lot of satanic
Yeah.
Yeah, you're battling the demons.
symbols. Yeah, but upon battling them, you're opening yourself up for invitation for it to come upon you.
Yeah, insane cultists, you're weakening, and your own weakening faith. That's in
Yeah,
the.
so you're giving
I
in.
don't know about that.
You're giving in to Satan.
You're not giving in. That is
but
not
that's
necessarily an
how.
option, but it is if you are failing at the game. I don't know. I just don't agree with you guys on this one.
Okay, well. Yeah, I'm just seeing too much imagery that I don't really like, and I can get why it would be a fun game, which is something that we could recommend that as a fun game. But from a Christian and Catholic perspective,
No, absolutely not. Yeah.
Not like getting it.
No, I'm sorry, Joe.
Priest tested, Vatican unapproved review. Okay.
Well, it seems like that's all the time we have today on the Catholic Gamers. I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. Give us a like. Give us some feedback. Honestly, there's a lot of stuff we talked about today that we're looking for some feedback on. So please give us a like, a follow, a comment. Like, comment, subscribe, ring that bell. But whatever platform we're on, get her done. But boys, give us a send off.
I'm Connor. We stream on Tuesdays Central Time at 7:30. If you want to tune in and hang out with us, you're welcome to join. We usually stream for about an hour and a half. So if you want to come hang out with us, you're welcome to do that.
And I'm James. I don't know.
You're here every week.
Yeah, I wouldn't say the mastermind, but
the instigator.
Yeah. I am the holder of the passwords and the editor of the episodes. So
the editor's identity has been released. Run away!
I thought that was pretty clear already. Alrighty. All right. Well, bye.
Okay, bye. Have a good time.
Later.